fiction books sort of play with your emotions, and it allows you to feel emotions of the characters जो वो emotions feel कर रहे होते हैं. ठीक है? Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Desi Expats. Today we want to talk about the books we're reading right now and also give you guys a few recommendations about books we think have been really helpful to us. Sajan, let's start with you. What are you reading right now?
So currently I'm reading this book which I have always wanted to read, Bhagavad Gita. So in fact, we had this course in our MBA called Management Paradigms from Bhagavad Gita.
Oh,
It's a very famous course at IIM Bangalore.
nice.
And it talks about basically how, so Bhagavad Gita talks about staying lean in life. And the professor actually connected a lot of those principles of staying lean, having minimalism to op strategy. So that worked out very well. But I had this chance of rereading this book recently because, like we spoke about in our last mini cast about our fitness journeys. So this allowed me to just reconnect with myself in a different way.
Well, what do you think you've really gotten out of it? Abhi, matlab, I don't know if you finished it, yeah, nahi, but at this point, what do you think?
Also, another interesting thing,
Yeah.
some books, when you reread them, you find newer insights.
100%.
Because you're not the same person who read it in
Yeah.
the previous time.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mark reading this book back then as truly
Okay.
a
Yeah.
reflection.
Got it. That was coursework.
That
Yeah.
was coursework,
Yeah.
and you know how coursework.
लेकिन जो तू अभी पढ़ रहा है क्या तुझे मिला है इस किताब में से?
Yeah, it's a very difficult book to summarize, but
Yeah.
essentially, what I feel is there's a higher form factor for sure.
Yeah.
You cannot ignore that form factor. This Einstein theory of universe being, by the end of it, it's all randomness.
Yeah.
And maybe it's God is that randomness,
Yeah.
however you wanna
Yeah.
call it. But one of the learning that I had like out of this book was the way to really get God is not just praying the God, but by doing your job
Right.
with utmost honesty,
Mm.
utmost sincerity. If I'm doing my job with the motivation of having ulterior motivations of getting financial success out of
Right.
it, that's fine. As a human, you can have all those things, but then you get so bound by those results that you are not able to see a larger picture and perform. So it's a lot about sticking to the process. And the book also talks about lifestyle of a yogi.
Right.
So yogi is somebody who's ruthlessly focused on one particular task, the objective at hand, and is very, very much input focused that what needs to happen at my end for this thing to become a reality. And then you are ruthlessly chasing that task. So I'm into management as well, right? So there were a lot of learnings in terms of staying lean in life, having a very minimalistic lifestyle.
Yeah.
It talked about having a great focus, and there's a concept called indriya. So basically, it's senses, but there are a lot of in their thoughts.
Okay.
So we get distracted by a lot of thoughts, and the book talks about just continuously focusing on the job at hand, and not worrying about results, which is karmane wadi ka raste maa phoshu karna chahiye. So it's the most famous quote out of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, they ruthlessly focus on the process.
It's very cool how you can read a text which is thousands of years old and find things that are relevant for your life.
Absolutely.
Even today.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And Ali, you and I had that discussion, right? That there are things that you were learning out of Quran, and
Yeah,
there are
and
things that I was learning
it's
out of
it's a very perennial sort of thing. Across traditions, you find very a lot of commonalities, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
How about you, Sam? What's the book you're reading?
Funnily and weirdly, the book I'm reading right now is a non-fiction book, which is for both of you, as you know, I'm a fiction lover.
Yeah.
I love stories. I love novels. I
Yeah.
love romance novels. I want to write one someday, putting it out there in the universe. But yeah, I'm reading like a very famous book again, which is called How to Win Friends and Influence
Oh, yeah,
People,
great
Dale
book.
Carnegie.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I've come back to it. I
Hmm.
did try reading it once before, almost like 4 or 5 years back, when that first time everyone's telling you this is the self-help book
Yeah.
to read, and I'm starting to read it. And तब कुछ नहीं समझा था basically कि
Hmm.
ऐसे बस पढ़ लिया, but didn't internalize it, did
Hmm.
not learn anything from it.
Hmm.
And suddenly I'm in this place in my life now, and I'm realizing that a lot of my days, months, years are
Hmm.
influenced by my interactions with people
Hmm.
in my personal life or in my professional life. And my success or failure is going to be determined by the propensity that I have to influence them,
Yeah.
to agree with what I'm saying. Something as simple as like a topic that I suggest, convincing you both to do
Yeah.
podcast on it.
Yeah.
And I did that very recently.
Yeah.
So that takes like a certain propensity and skill to deal with people. And I've, through my professional pursuits, but also through my friendship conversations, I've come to realize that it's very important. So I started rereading that book, and this time making notes,
Yeah.
like writing
It's a
notes
game
down.
changer, isn't it?
हम उस दिन
Yeah.
बात कर रहे थे कि when you write it down, it
Yeah.
goes here directly.
You're forcing yourself to interact with the material more,
Yeah.
at a more deeper analytical level. when
Because you're
writing.
not just reading, you're reading and writing down your interpretation of what that person
And
is saying.
you're having a conversation with the writer
Exactly.
when you're writing,
Yeah.
uske saath, and you're making notes. Because the writer is trying to sell you something at the end of the day. वो तुम्हें एक idea दे रहा है.
हाँ,
This is especially in a self-help book,
Yeah.
right? Do this,
100%.
and then you're either agreeing or you're saying, actually, you know what, like I tried this, didn't work, or something like
Right.
that, right? Or how I can actually use this.
I agree. And like, how does it, like, customizing it to my life? And
Yeah.
only I can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't do it
Yeah.
for me. Nobody else
Yeah.
can do it for me. So I think it's a very interesting book. It's a very old book. People
Yeah.
say it's a very powerful book.
Yeah.
So I'm yet to see some stuff. One thing that I actually picked up recently, and I use it in my work life, was he says in the very beginning that it's a very big task to convince someone without making that person feel dumb about that particular topic. You know, like
Yeah.
presenting something to someone and asking or making them agree to it without making them feel dumb about.
So basically, not sounding derogatory, or
Yeah.
not complaining or
that patronizing
yeah.
nahi karna hai, basically.
Hmm.
So that, and I think that coming from the kind of pedigree we come from, or having worked in finance and then moving to tech, you always have this. I had this propensity to complicate things and be like, I'll talk about the numbers and I'll talk
Hmm.
about the percentage changes and stuff like that. And I have to talk to a very different demographic, which is like a sales heavy demographic in my
Hmm.
company right now. And I'm like, they're not dumb. They're just very good at what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not dumb. I'm very good at what I do. But I need to get them to agree to something. So I need to convince them, but present it in a way
Hmm.
that they think I'm speaking sense and they don't think I'm making them feel dumb.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I've picked up from the book.
No, very
That's-
interesting. The thing you mentioned at the start, that you went back to this book after 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
because you were dealing with people more. I had a very similar experience. Like I read this book बहुत पहले.
हाँ.
एक time. It's really one of the first books
It's from the
self-help book
1950s
you
or
you
something.
read, right? Because everyone's recommending it. It's on the
Yeah.
it's on the top 10 list and everything. But I feel like when you're young, or maybe you're a grad starting out your job, first job, everything, it's less relevant क्योंकि उतना interact नहीं कर रहे तुम लोगों के साथ, जो तुम्हें convince नहीं करना पड़ रहा इतना लोगों
Right.
को. But really at our level,
Yeah.
जहाँ पे maybe our jobs are now putting us in that situation where we have to sell ideas and convince people, that book really opens
Yeah.
doors. So yeah, no, it's a great book.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come to my book now. As Sajan and Sameeksha can attest, I'm not the so I'm a very avid non-fiction reader. I don't read a lot of fiction books, but Sameeksha and a few other friends have convinced me to just start focusing on the fiction genre as well.
I'm so excited about the book you're reading right now.
Yeah. So abhi I'm reading 40 Rules of Love by Elif Shafak. Elif is a Turkish writer. She's got a few books out there, very well renowned. It's a very interesting thing because I've not read a lot of fiction now. So even when I am reading fiction books, I'm treating them as a non-fiction book. I.e.,
What do you mean?
I'm trying to. So 40 Rules of Love is the story of Romy and Shams Tabriz.
Yeah.
and it's a story of some middle-aged woman in America being given that book to read.
And it's not a love story.
It's not
It's
not a
not a
love
love
story.
story.
No, anyways, like that's besides the point. But um, what I'm trying to do is really see within that story what are some of the lessons I can get out of it for my own life.
Yeah.
Something that's very interesting is there's this character in the book Shams Tabriz, who was a Sufi saint back in the Ottoman era. I think this is 14th or maybe 16th century. I'm not sure. But he has these rules that he talks about in the book. But then there's a moment where he's frustrated about something. He wants to go to a certain place to meet Rumi, who is his companion that he's looking for, and he's frustrated because his inn master, the place he's living at, is not letting him go, right? And winter is turning into spring, spring is turning into autumn. He's like, I want to go, I want to meet this man. And he keeps reminding himself of the rules, i.e., he talks about patience, that you have to let life live through you rather than force it into a certain dimension. He's reminding himself. And what I really liked is, here's the guy who has all this knowledge. He knows what's right and wrong, and he knows he has to be patient. But he's forgetting, and he has to remind himself as well.
Nice.
What I really thought was interesting is, there's things I know in life. Because of my experiences and knowledge, कि अच्छा ये सही है, ये गलत है. I have to look at the end goal rather than what's immediately in front. Things like that.
Yeah.
Maxims you have, but you forget.
Yeah.
You have to keep reminding yourself, even if you're Shams Tabriz. So, what are some of the recommendations that Sajan you have for the best books you've ever read?
I think there are a lot of books. It's always very difficult to pick your top few books, but still, if I were to give a shot, my top 3 recommendations would be: one is Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl.
Beautiful book.
Classic.
Second is Christopher Clayton's book, How Will You Measure Your Life? So he was a strategy professor at Harvard who wrote a book on, because he wrote a lot of strategy books, but this one was on how will you measure your life. It's a very beautiful book if you're a freshly minted in. Third book I would I think there's a book called Factfulness. It allows you to look at there is a lot of data around us that tells us how doomed the world is, how it's going to dungeons, but Factfulness actually reminds us of how statistics can really tweak the way you look at things. It's a very beautiful book. So these 3 books are my recommendations.
Nice.
How about you, Sam?
I'm a fiction girl.
I hope I get some fiction. This is all non-fiction.
Yes.
I only read non-fiction.
No, I can totally relate.
We'll convert you soon. Don't worry. And just a point on that, like the reason I love fiction is it lets you live lives of people that you probably never will get a chance to live in this lifetime through literature.
100%.
So as an example, I will probably never be a Sufi saint, like wandering around Turkey as an example, like sharing my knowledge with people. But through that book, I'm able to see what their life is like. And for a split second, through empathy, I can just imagine what it must be like if I have good imagination. And then for a split second, I can feel those feelings.
Yeah, देखो ना कितनी मजे की चीज़ है. देखो तुम्हारे पास एक जिंदगी है. ठीक है, तुम एक बहुत लिमिटेड चीजें कर सकते हो जिंदगी में. तुम एक प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर हो, मैं एक इन्वेस्टमेंट बैंकर हूँ. लेकिन एक किताब के जरिए I can look at the world. I can look at 13th or 14th century Konya, right? The Anatolian plain. I can look at that and I can see the world through the eyes of someone like Shams Tabriz, who is going from one end to another.
Yes.
What that molded blanket feels like when he's sleeping there, and he's tired after walking so long. वो तुम जिंदगी जी सकते हो कई लोगों की through fiction. Is what I've really, what's really gotten me into fiction.
I love
the best part is you can, it allows you to imagine. Right now, like if you watch a lot of videos, it doesn't allow you to imagine.
So,
reading allows you to use your brain and paint a picture. Your top 3 books.
Top 3 books. The best.
I'm ordering these after this. So.
The best contemporary fiction book I've read in my life up until now is it's called Beautiful World, Where Are You? It's a book by a very famous fiction author, Sally Rooney. And the book is a very beautiful premise. And the reason it's called contemporary fiction is it's written like for people like you and me, live in cities, work in cities, have dilemmas like the characters in the book. But there is a fictional element to it. It's two random friends who live in Ireland, have very different lives. One is very successful professionally, one is not, but it's their friendship through ups and downs of lives and how that pans out. I've actually sent a very detailed newsletter like email to all my friends about this, and I read it because it moved me so much. And I remember saying about this is that it said the gist was that you look for beautiful worlds everywhere. You travel, some people do drugs, like you literally try to find it like almost desperately. But the most beautiful world exists in a plane that is almost unnoticeable to the public eye, but it's in between the conversations and the invisible love that you have with people that you care about.
That's amazing.
And that's the end of the book. And it's like almost unnoticeable because of how banal and commonplace everything is, but it's beautiful, and a bystander can see it, but not you. So that's the best book. You should order it right away.
I will.
Very well written. That's the first one. Second one, I think anything to do with like Elif Shafak is brilliant. I love her writing. I love her style of writing. I love this whole like the whole concept of like mysticism, Sufi saints, wandering dervishes.
Also, her style of writing, it's stories within stories.
Yes,
it's very hard to do.
It's very hard to do. She's a very prolific writer.
Very
like,
prolific writer.
No comment there. But any book by Elif Shafak is amazing. And then like if I had to name one like non-fiction book for myself, I think I've really liked like How to Win Friends so far. I'm reading it the second time around, but it's like books like these that have stood the test of time, I think are definitely worth reading.
Very cool. So for me, I think I'll start with a non-fiction book. And it's not really a book. So it's called Meditations. It's
Marcus Aurelius.
Marcus Aurelius. So it's basically the journal of one of the most powerful men who ever lived. So Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, philosopher king, right? And he had a journal, he had a diary, much like we have our journals. And you can totally imagine, one of the most powerful men in the world, and he's on battlefields, he's in his tent, and he's writing his journal about whatever thoughts are troubling him and whatever he's dealing with. So that's what Meditations is. He'll write to himself, and he's like, Marcus, focus on things you can control and not on things that are not in your control.
He's talking to himself in third person.
Yeah, he's talking to himself. It's amazing. And
that's what you do in journal.
Yeah, the lessons you learn from that are, this again stand the test of time. And what you realize is people had pretty similar problems, millennia ago. They're dealing with the same type of stuff. The other book I'd recommend is 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. It's a must-read book. People try and shy away from rules in the world that we're living in. I think modern culture is very like, I don't want any rules or like, maxims in life. I want to, have a very flow, open mind, and that's fine. But there's certain time-tested principles that really help you sort of manage the chaos that inevitably comes up in life. And I think 12 Rules for Life is great.
I have a question on that. He's known to be like a writer, author, speaker for like the young adult male population. Should I read it?
I think so, yes. Okay. I don't think 12 Rules for Life is a very... I know why he attracts that audience, because I feel like as a young man in today's culture, what young men have been robbed of is exactly those rules and those initiation ceremonies, the bar mitzvah, the coming of age, right? And that
what
that,
a man is supposed to do.
Exactly that literary father figure who's telling you the rules of life and what you need to do. And what manhood is, and I think Jordan Peterson is sort of trying to help young men navigate that sort of landscape. The final book is a fiction book. It's the first fiction book I ever read.
Let's go.
It's called Moth Smoke. There's a Pakistani writer called Mohsin Hamid, Pakistani British writer, and he wrote about this story. There's 3 characters. They're all in Lahore. They're sort of early 30s, that sort of age, successful, well, two of them are successful. And it talks about the Lahore that I was growing up in and the culture and the subculture for different social strata. So it's very interesting. For me, I loved that book, not because there was any particular lesson I got out of it, but there's a female character in the book that is, how there's this thing about having a literary crush.
Oh, always.
So I always used to laugh at the idea, how can you like have a crush on someone who doesn't exist?
Always.
Right? But there's a girl in there and she's completely reckless.
So he's finally talking about love.
Yeah, I mean, a completely reckless girl, right? But there's something about her, and it's a very interesting read. Very interesting characters and the way Mohsin Hamid brings their emotions and their specific proclivities out is very interesting.
But on that, like historic fiction is a very nice subset of fiction. So people want to start reading fiction for the first time because, like, I remember one of the best historic fictions I ever read is Train to Pakistan, which is about the.
That's a great book.
It's the first book that I remember made me cry. Literally, it was 2 a.m. I read the last line of the book. And like there were tears like coming down my eyes, I remember, and these are very vivid memories.
I feel so heartless admitting to the fact that I don't read fiction.
Yep.
Fictions that I have read are 1984 Animal Farm.
Oh my God, Dystopia.
Which is a great book.
Those are great books, but I read those as
non-fiction books. 100%.
Yeah, but I have not read fiction lately. So I mean, Bhagavad Gita, I don't know what.
लेकिन मैं तेरे को एक बात बताऊं, I get it. Like maybe थोड़ा सा इस तरफ आया हूँ fiction की तरफ, and the reason is, like obviously my friends have convinced me. Yes, Moth Smoke really helped when I read it. I was listening to an interview, Elif Shafak, the person who's written 40 Rules of Love, and she says, men will always focus on non-fiction books. Because our idea is always, what can I get out of it? मुझे अपने 5-6 lessons सीखने हैं और जाके apply करने हैं and then improve my life. I get it. That's the mentality I had as well. Fiction books sort of play with your emotions and it allows you to feel emotions of the characters जो वो emotions feel कर रहे होते हैं. ठीक है? And Elif Shafak यही कहती है
Men don't feel.
No, there's a place for emotion in your life, right? So why do you want to not feed that particular subset जो as a human is part of the human experience?
Yeah.
So मैं तुझे भी कहूँगा and I'll say this to anyone who's listening to the video as well. मतलब try and read as broadly as possible. Try and read writers you really disagree against.
I agree.
Different points of views as broadly as you can, and it'll really enrich your life.
I'd read somewhere that why should you read fiction? ऐसा था question, and somebody had written, you read fiction because it's both a temporary refuge from reality and makes you appreciate your reality more at the same time. In the same route. And so we urge you to read more fiction, more non-fiction, just read more in general. And tell us in the comments what's your favorite book, and let's talk more about it.
Thanks a lot for watching the episode, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to your book recommendations.